In this short video, we will be showing how you can quickly and easily scale in and out a Tanzu Kubernetes cluster. We'll be using Tanzu Kubernetes Grid 1.5. However, if you're using a slightly earlier or slightly later version, I'm sure that the commands will translate without too many issues. I should also make mention that we are talking about Tanzu Kubernetes Grid and not, as sometimes gets confused with, vSphere with Tanzu, which is a separate VMware Kubernetes product. As you can see on the screen, we have a PowerShell prompt in Windows. I have already configured the Tanzu and kubectl CLIs. I've already authenticated and set my correct contexts just to save time. So let's go ahead now and take a look at the environment and then how we can scale in and out that Kubernetes environment. So the first command that I'm going to type is Tanzu management cluster get, and this command will show what my management cluster is and its configuration. So we can see that the name is tkgm-mgt. I have one control plane, one worker node. Its role is management, and I'm running it as a dev plan, which is very much a development cluster with only one control plane. Let's now type in Tanzu cluster list. This will show any workload clusters that I have running and managed under my management cluster. At the moment, I only have one. This one is called tkgm-wrk01. It's running in the default namespace. I have one control plane, two worker nodes. As you can see, the plan is dev, which also denotes that it's basically one control plane node. Let's take a look inside Kubernetes now using kubectl. And if we go get nodes, we can see that control plane and those two worker nodes. Pay attention to the last characters of the control plane and the worker nodes. We'll go ahead and verify those nodes inside vCenter. So if we look inside vCenter, we have a resource pool where the nodes get provisioned into. We can see our tkgm-wrk01 control plane node, and we can see our two worker nodes. Let's jump back over to the CLI now, and let's start the process to scale out this cluster. So we'll type in cluster, Tanzu cluster, scale. Here we are presented with a few different flags that are required when we need to scale out our cluster. Now, if we're scaling out the control plane, we only need to define the control plane flag. If we're scaling out just the worker nodes, we just need to define the worker machine count flag. So in this initial example, we're going to scale out the worker nodes. So we'll type in Tanzu cluster scale. Now the first thing that we need to do is define the name of the cluster that we want to scale. So it's tkgm-wrk01. Next we're going to define our namespace. Now you really only need to define this if your namespace is something other than the default namespace. In this case, it's a little redundant, but we're going to put it in nevertheless. The next flag is worker machine count, and you'll see next to the flag up the top, it says int32. It's just basically requesting a number that needs to be placed here. So we're going to say 3. So we currently had 2 worker nodes. By putting a 3, we're telling it we want it to grow by 1. We get a message back that just lets us know we've successfully updated our worker node machine deployment. If we now jump back over to vCenter if we look at the recent tasks, we can see that our machine has already been provisioned and is currently being set up. So if we look at the last couple of digits, Z4, Z4S, we can click on that. We can open up a console, and this machine will now start to be configured up as a new node in our cluster. Let's jump back over to our CLI. Let's type in kubectl get nodes, and we can see that new node be provisioned now. So if you pay attention to that last line there, Z4S LQ, its status is not ready, and it's only a few seconds old. So what we'll do is we're going to wait for a few minutes, and then we're going to run this command again. With the magic of video, a few minutes has passed. Let's type in the command again, kubectl get nodes, and we can see that that bottom node there, Z4S LQ, is now in a status of ready, and it's 3 minutes old. Let's go ahead and type in Tanzu cluster list, and we can see our cluster now has 3 worker nodes. Okay, let's clear the screen now. Let's now scale in our cluster. So let's remove one of the nodes that we just provisioned. So let's type in Tanzu cluster scale. We can see those flags again. So we'll type in Tanzu cluster scale tkgm-wrk01. That is the cluster name. We'll define the namespace. Default. We're going to type in worker machine count, and we're going to put it back to 2, so what it originally was. We'll hit enter. We'll see that our command's gone through. So at this point, our cluster will now be scaling back. If we type in kubectl get nodes, we can see that one of our clusters has its scheduling disabled, and it's being prepared to be basically decommissioned from this Kubernetes cluster. If we jump back over to vCenter, we can see a new task here where it's powered off one of the nodes, and it's gone ahead and deleted that node. If we jump back over to the CLI now, if we type in the same command again, we can see that that node now has disappeared. And that's it, folks. That's all that's required to scale in and out a cluster. So very simple. The exact same commands can apply to doing the control plane as well. So just remember to use the control plane flag, and you shouldn't have too many issues. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm trying out something new for my blog. Please let me know if you enjoyed it and any other videos you might like to see in the future. Thank you.